Hello everyone, my name is Leong Wen Jie, and in this video, I will be presenting about my Mastermind computer game. My Mastermind computer game works similarly to the original game whereby the player has to guess a sequence of colors. In my game, there are 4 possible colors of red, yellow, green, and blue in the answer sequence. The generation may contain repetition of the same color in the sequence, for example, red, 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 green, blue, or yellow, red, blue, blue. Instead of going through the tedious process of typing the full name of the color for each guess, players can enter the initials of the colors, for example, entering B for blue, R for red, and so on. My game also allows players to have unlimited attempts on guessing the sequence. This is the message that will be displayed to the player at the start of the game program. The program will ask if the player wants to start playing, and if the player enters N for no, a closing message will be displayed. If the player enters a number or a symbol, the program will display an error message and ask the player to enter their selection again. As shown in the code, this is made possible by the implementation of while loop. The loop will only be broken if the player enters Y or N. Note that I have programmed my game in a way that the capitalization of all the player's input does not matter as long as the input is valid. If the player enters Y, a welcome message followed by the introduction and instructions to the game will be displayed to the player, and they will be prompted to play by entering their first guess of the first color in the color sequence. Here I am showing the generated sequence on top for demonstration purposes. In the actual game, this will be hidden from the player. The sequence of colors is randomly generated through the code shown. Here I have predefined a list of possible outcomes of colors in the list named color list. The random library is used to generate the random sequence, which will be inserted into a list named correct answer. The k=4 indicates the number of items the program will randomly select out of the color list. This random function allows repetition of colors generated in the sequence because it picks each color randomly based on the 4 choices. After the player has chosen to start playing and has entered the first color guess, they will be prompted to guess the second color. If they input any letter other than RYGB, or if they input a number or a symbol, an error message will appear and they will be asked to input their guess again. Each guess box is encased in a while loop where it is initialized and assumed that the guess input is invalid. Each time the player inputs their guess, it will be validated in the user-defined function which takes in the input and the invalid variable. In the function, an if-else statement will check if the input is R, Y, G, or B. If it is not, then the game will show an error message and ask to guess again. If it is, then the full name of the color will be assigned accordingly and the invalid variable will then be set to false, which breaks the loop. At the end of the function, the full name and the value of the invalid variable is returned to the while loop. This process is repeated for all 4 guesses. At the end, the 4 guesses are inserted into a pre-initialized empty list, which then will be compared to the generated sequence later on. After the player has input all their guesses, the game will show them what was their 4 guesses. Then it will compile and show them which specific color in the sequence that they got correct or wrong, followed by their total number of correct and wrong guesses. I used a for loop for this to work. I set the range to be from 0 to 3 because there are 4 colors in the sequence and 0 to 3 represents their indexes in the list. When I is 0, it means that the program is evaluating the first color. Then it goes to another if-else statement to determine if the first color in the player's guess matches the first color in the generated sequence. If it is true, then the game should display that the first color is correct and the number of correct guesses should increase by 1. If not, then the game should display that the first color is wrong and the number of wrong guesses should increase by 1. As long as the sequence of colors guessed is not the same as the random sequence generated by the game program, the game will ask the player to guess again starting from the very first color. This is made possible by the while loop included, which loops the program in the condition where player's guess is not the same as the generated sequence. My game source code is encased in a while loop so that the player can choose to play again. At the start of each game, the number of tries the player has taken to guess the sequence is set to 0. After each time the player attempts to guess the 4 colors of the sequence, the number of tries will increase by 1 due to the try plus equals to 1 added at the end of the loop. The number of tries will stop increasing when the player guesses the correct sequence and the loop breaks. After the player has finally guessed the correct sequence, a congratulating message will be displayed along with the number of tries they took. The game will then ask if the player wishes to play again. If the player enters Y for yes, then the game will reconfirm with the player if they are sure. If the player enters Y again to indicate that they are sure they want to play again, then the game will restart and a new color sequence will be generated. Note that the number of tries will reset to 0 in each new game. If the player enters Y but then they proceed to enter N in the confirmation field, this means that they initially want to play again but then they are not sure. Therefore, the game will ask the player again if they want to play again. In this example, when asked the second time if the player wants to play again, they enter no and yes they are sure, then the game will close. The logic in the example shown previously also applies if the player enters no during the first time when asked if they want to play again, and yes, they are sure. As we can see from the examples, the game will reconfirm with the player after they input their selection to play again or not. In the confirmation, if the player enters no to indicate that they are not sure, then the game will ask them again to choose if they want to play again. If the player inputs anything other than Y or N, then the game will display an error message and loop to ask them to enter their selection again. This is the code behind the error handling of the input selection. The game running code is encased inside a while loop with the looping condition of restart equals to y. If the player inputs yes they want to play again and yes they are sure, the value in restart remains as y, which fulfills the looping condition, and a new game will be started. If the player inputs no they do not want to play again and yes they are sure, the value in restart will be set to n, which breaks the loop, and the ending banner function will be displayed. If the player enters n to indicate that they are not sure, then the game will repeat and ask the player if they want to play again. In both the restart and confirmation selection, if the player enters anything else other than y or n, the game will display an error message and ask them to choose again. At the start of my program, these are three functions that I have predefined. First, we have the game starting banner, which consists of the instructions and introduction to the game. Second, we have the game ending banner, which shows the player that the game program has been terminated. And last, we have the color validation and name assignment function, which will check if the player's input is a valid guess option and then assign the full name of the color accordingly. That's all for my presentation. I hope you enjoyed and thank you for watching.